Hi everybody, my name is Dennis and welcome back to another album review. Today we are reviewing the debut record from Black Country New Road, entitled For the First Time. Now, I'll be honest, I was really excited when this came out. I had the day marked on my calendar. I was looking forward to this. Which may have some of you wondering, why did you take so long to put out this review? And that's because my life has been incredibly busy. But not only that, there was a surprisingly large amount of things to digest in this you know, very compact record. I don't really want to call it short because each of the tracks here are quite lengthy, but there was a lot to digest here, and it took me quite a few listens, honestly, to really get my thoughts on it centered. My opinions of it were jumping all over the place. I was thinking this is one of the best albums I've ever heard, and then I was thinking, well, it's fine, but it's not what it's hyped up to be, and sometimes landing in the middle, and it took me a while to really gather my thoughts on it. But I think I've finally reached a conclusion on it, and that conclusion is that it is somewhat flawed, but great. It's a great album. It's a great debut, and I think that they can really only go up from here if they keep on the right path. But I love this album. It's an amazing record, it's an amazing debut, and Black Country New Road are definitely one of the bands to look out for. They've been dropping a few singles here and there over the past few years, all of which, or at least most of which, have been quite phenomenal. I mean, Sunglasses as a single was just astounding. I loved track X that came out earlier this year. Science Fair is a great song. I mean, I guess I'm spoiling kind of how I feel about the record already, but I mean, these singles were great. And then you get onto the album, and four of the tracks on here were released as singles beforehand, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that, but there wasn't really a lot new here, I guess. But it all kind of worked together in a really interesting character portrait. I will say the one drawback to doing this is actually the things that changed. The tracks Athens, France, and Sunglasses both had what I felt to be pretty significant edits between the singles and the album versions, both of which I think ended up changing for the worse. Athens, France is definitely the much worse victim of the two. The vocals feel so much less passionate, there's a lot less edge to it. The kind of manic spoken word nature of it feels a lot cleaner, less rough around the edges, and loses that charm that I think it had, as well as lyrical changes throughout that really, if anything, ruin it for me, if I'm being completely frank. It's a very personal track, and it remains a very personal one even on the album, but so many of the lyrics about sexual frustration and abuse and, bad sexual experiences are just completely scrapped. I think people have been theorizing, especially with the replacement lyrics on here that talk about, him regretting writing certain words, are just about how in depth and how, picked apart people took these lyrics to be, which I think is kind of unfortunate because they were really, really well written. Him talking about pretending to be asleep while some girl tries to have sex with him, where he's not this stereotypical guy who's just, looking to, get laid every chance he gets, but he had bad sexual experiences and he had abusive relationships, it seems. And it's a very personal experience that he's putting out in this music. And I think it's really unfortunate that people have kind of looked at it so in depth and discussed it so in depth to the point where he doesn't even feel comfortable putting it on the record anymore. It's really unfortunate because I do think it loses a lot of the personality that Athens, France did have. It's kind of unfortunate, I think, because even though instrumentally I still think it's fine. I mean, the guitar work at the end is amazing. I love the drumming at the very tail end of the track. It's just disappointing to see how much worse it is in comparison because I love the original. I still love the original, and this new one just feels so inferior. The same goes for the track Sunglasses, where it's not quite to the same extent, but the ending of it, that kind of outro verse, has less manic energy to it this time around. The lyrics change to, instead of, F me like you mean it, Isaac, which carries so much more weight than, burn what's left of all the cards you have. It carries so much less emotional weight to it. It's really, really depressing, if anything, because there was so much more character to it before, and it's just not there anymore. Because Sunglasses is a great track, and I still think as it stands on the album, it works. It's just not nearly as well as it did before, which is sad. It works in three phases, each having completely different sets of instrumentals, and the transitions are just really spotless. The humor is witty and self demeaning and really kind of almost sadistic in a way, but in such a clever and engaging way. It's very poetic, if anything, where he's talking about essentially being a piece of crap in a relationship who doesn't take things seriously and then realizing it, but instead of doing something about it, he puts on his sunglasses and kind of goes back into the shadows and pays attention to everything else and changes the subject and everything. It's an interesting character portrayal because you're not supposed to agree with him or root for him here, but it's just showing that's how it is, and it plays really, really well into the character he builds for himself on other tracks on here. Where, tracks like Athens, France establish him as being kind of a damaged person who has had issues with his band in the past and the artistic directions they're taking, and being a very confused person artistically. The following track, Science Fair, is a really beautiful song. I love the manic instrumentation on here. I love the noisiness of it, the chaotic energy that it all brings. The spoken word, Slint-esque vocals on here are really, really phenomenal. I love the narrative, the storytelling on here, where he talks about embarrassing himself in front of this girl at a science fair because he tries to show off and he literally catches her on fire. And then he goes to a Cirque du Soleil, sees this girl, stripping, and he thinks that she's doing it for him. And then he, kind of realizes, wait a second, there's an entire crowd around me. I'm just another face in this crowd. She doesn't care. And his struggles with relationships and understanding love and affection. It's a really gorgeous character portrayal that's very, very poetic. It's so well written, and I love everything about it. There are long instrumental breaks between the different elements of this song, from some really jazzy, high energy, high octane horns to these noisy, aggressive guitars to this very insane drumming. It's so, so beautiful. It's really, really enthralling. A later track on here, track X, is kind of the sweetest, most stripped back love song on here that is so beautifully imperfect. The things that he talks about for what he's done for this girl are so specific, so sweet, so endearing, yet so non-romantic. Saying I love you in front of Black Midi. Fans of my channel may remember my glowing review of Black Midi's debut record, and Black Midi and Black Country New Road have been bands that have collaborated in the past. It's a very, very odd song, yet it's so sweet, where he brings up all these just really, really endearing moments, and it just ends up being so gorgeous. It's not manic, it's not crazy, it's not wildly experimental, it doesn't have the insane horns or the fast-paced drumming like most other tracks do on here. Yet it all works so well, it ends up being a really, really beautiful cut, and easily one of my favorites on here. And then the only other two tracks that I have yet to mention are the opening and the closing one. These two tracks I feel are very similar, and both of them are phenomenal. The opening one is called Instrumental, and it is appropriately named because it is just instrumental. It's the only purely instrumental cut on here, and it is phenomenal. I love the drumming on here. I love the progression of it all. I love how everything builds up, and there's these small nuanced additions that just add themselves onto the instrumentals while then slowly collapsing. And then slowly building themselves back up just to collapse once again. It's so, so enthralling and such a gorgeous opener to the record that I think really sets the stage for the soundscape of the entire thing. And the very similar track at the end of it being called Opus. It has a similar sound palette with similar sounding instrumentals, a very diverse soundscape, a lot of things going into it, and very long drawn out instrumental periods, but there are some really interesting lyrics that go into here too. It's not as lyrical as maybe some of the more narrative based tracks earlier on, but it still has some personal moments, some interesting poetic lyricism on here, and it works so gorgeously. I love everything about Opus. It is a phenomenal closer to the album that really just wraps things up in such a beautiful way. He talks about themes of just kind of understanding that everything comes to an end someday, and having to confront that idea of the good things in your life ending. And I think a lot of that is about this band here. It's very self reflective, it's very self referential, and it's very intriguing. I love the way that that Isaac here portrays himself on this entire record. I love his vocal performance, I love his lyrics, and his backing members of the band do just a phenomenal job. The horn sections are just phenomenal throughout this entire record. The guitar work is sharp, hard hitting, and amazingly produced. The noisiness, the denseness, the rough around the edges style that they have going on is just so invigorating. There's really not a whole lot that I don't love about this album. The only thing I really wish was different was that they didn't change the things they changed on the original singles. Because other than that, the track list on here is consistently top notch. There's not a whole lot on here that I don't think is worth revisiting at least a few times, because this album is really great, and I'm really excited to see where they go from here, because I think they could put out something really groundbreaking. I'm feeling a decent 8 on this one overall. If you listen to this album, be sure to tell me what you thought down in the comments below. Tell me how wrong my opinion is, as always, and I'll see you in the next review.